Hi everyone, welcome back. This month's webinar is entitled Social Media Workshop for Scientists, Extending Your Digital Footprint, featuring our host, Sreenivasan. We are really looking forward to this talk today. In case you're less familiar with us, the work we do at the Alda Center is about empowering scientists, medical professionals, and researchers to communicate their work clearly and vividly to all audiences. All right, Sree, I'll leave it to you now. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks very much, Jamie. It's a pleasure to be here and to spend this time talking about social media with folks who are involved in science. I am delighted to spend the next hour and a half or so with you and everybody who's joining us. We're going to have hundreds of people, which is awesome. Please make sure you ask questions, and we will put all the questions. The questions will be collected and then shared with me, so I'll be able to get to them and give you a chance to hear some of my thoughts on your questions. We may not be able to get all the questions, but we'll do our best. We are using the hashtag Sree tips for today. So if you're on Twitter, I hope you will use Sree tips to share what is what's being what I talk about, and also some of the answers to your questions. We have a slide deck to just kind of help us guide the conversation, but we do want this to give you a chance to hear as many questions and answers as possible. I wanted to start by showing you how you can get the deck and use it for yourself. So the first way is through this bit.ly link that you see on the screen, bit.ly/3science. If you type that in, you will have your own version of this Google Slides doc that you can then have and use. One of the best ways to make use of this conference and conversation is by taking notes on a piece of paper, on a computer, on your phone. I like to make what I call an action checklist. And for that action checklist, you may want to have two columns. One could be things to try now, and then things to try later. I'm going to be throwing a lot of things at you: names of tools, names of platforms, lots of tips and tricks in addition to big ideas. So if you can annotate this document or annotate this conversation, you'll find it useful as we go forward. And I believe that annotation is one of those great 21st century skills that scientists especially are good at, but it's something that that muscle that you want to keep developing. So maybe the first thing you write down is bit.ly, and what bit.ly allows you to do is to create these short customizable URLs that are very easy to remember. And that way you can have several in your head that you're using and being able to share at the right moment with the right people. So so I encourage everybody to create a free bit.ly link. Next, I wanted to tell you a little bit about how another way in which you could think about technology to help you get the presentation, but also tell a little bit larger story about one of the ways in which social and digital media is changing the world. I used to be, before I started as a social media consultant on my own, I used to be the chief digital officer of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and after that, the chief digital officer of the city of New York. And when I was at both places, people would say, why don't you have more QR codes everywhere? And in America, QR codes are not that popular. And I heard the term robot vomit to describe QR codes. And I sort of like that because QR codes don't tell you anything. So you may say, Sree, why do you have QR codes right on this document that you're sharing? And the answer to that is because something changed in a big way a couple of years ago. Apple built in a QR code reader into the iPhone camera. So if you have an iPhone right now, you can just pull out your phone and point it right at the screen, and you will get the QR code, and through the QR code, you will get the link to my presentation. And there's a lesson here for the science folks amongst us that that it's not enough to just have some great technology or a great feature people have to know how to use it. And a lot of people who are iPhone users don't know that. In other countries, by the way, in America, we are not good at using QR codes, but in other countries, QR codes are very common and very widely used, but not so much here in America. So I have shown this feature to a lot of people who love their iPhones but don't know this. And what does that tell you? That even Apple, the greatest marketing machine of all time, could have a great feature, but if you don't bring your audience along, your customers, your audience, and tell them what you have, that's not enough to be successful. And so if you have the iPhone, you can point at it, but if you have an Android phone, you can use a Google app and point what's called a Google Lens at the screen, and you'll get the presentation. I want to thank the folks at the Alda Center for Communicating Science for hosting this, as well as the Kavli Foundation and the American Chemical Society. I know that when we have a big group of people like this, hundreds of folks, we're going to have people with different levels of knowledge of social media. So I want to start by saying I will not be able to hit the right tone and right level for everybody. And what I'm hoping is that if there is enough interest in what we do here, we can do more advanced versions of this, or we can have you ask me questions, and through that we can do the more advanced stuff. But hopefully there'll be enough interesting material here for everybody. And that's one of the challenges of doing this kind of online instruction when you can't see the faces of the participants as you're speaking. Wanted to give you my email address. You have it there, sree@sree.net. You have my Twitter, my Instagram, my Facebook, my LinkedIn, also my newsletter. And probably the most useful thing I can do for you today is to invite you to my closed Facebook group. It's called Sree's Advanced Social. And it's a group of thousands of people who have taken my courses, and senior people who work at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc., and journalists and others. And you can go in there and ask a question, and somewhere will be awake somewhere in the world, and they will answer your question for you. It's a very helpful, useful place, not because of me, but because of the community that's there. And that's one of the things I want you to think about as you think about your digital footprint is, do you have a digital community that you've built along with the physical community and your real life colleagues? So thinking about that and looking and joining my closed Facebook group is a great way for you to extend the learning that we're doing today. And because this is on Google Slides, everything you see here is clickable, and you'll be able to access everything here. And finally, I'll just mention, if you like this kind of learning opportunity, my social media weekend, which is my flagship learning event, is on March 21st at Pace University in downtown Manhattan. People coming in from all over the world, and we'd love to see some of you folks there. All right, so let's get going, and let's start with the ABCs. I told you we're going basic. ABC to me is always be charging your phone. Really important to think about your electronics and having all the ways in which your tools are not just up to date, but also the battery life is something you're paying attention to. I carry multiple battery packs with me at all times, and I encourage you to do the same. Second, always be connecting is about the importance of connecting with people when you don't need them, so that they're there when you need them. You can't wait till you have problems or you need a job or you're about to graduate from grad school and then start looking. You have to be connecting with people all the time. So I encourage you to connect with me, connect with others, and build out your network when you don't need it, so that it can really help you flourish when you do need it. And finally, always be collecting is about the importance of your phone as a collection device and using it to collect slides you're seeing here or something you're seeing out, using as a, so that when you see things, you capture it. Doesn't mean you share it, but if you don't collect it in the first place, you can't share it out. And I've given you access to all my slides, but giving you 50 slides, like giving you 5,000 slides, you're never going to look at them again. But if you leave today with a few slides on your phone of the things that you thought are really interesting or helpful, that's one way to be collecting this information. And of course, a reminder to please tweet what you can out of this and your comments as well. And I'll look back at Sree Tips, hashtag Sree Tips when I'm done. And finally, when we talk about the always start is always be learning. And social and digital media changes so quickly that I am constantly learning. And I do these sessions in part to learn from you and from the online community, and encourage you all to continue to learn. And that's why I salute you all for joining us here today. Hundreds of folks. It's fabulous. I told you a little bit about my background. I had an incredible career as a journalist that I'm so grateful for, and I worked at the Metropolitan Museum. And then one day I lost my job. And it was something that I was not ready for at all. And I was brought in one day and told I'm leaving. And I didn't know what to do. So I went on Facebook and told people that I've lost my job. Tell me what to do next. And I gave people a Google form to fill in, and 1,400 people around the world filled in this form and gave me some incredible, good, useful ideas and some terrible, awful ideas. But they gave me, at the worst moment of my life, what I call a global digital hug. And it really brought home to me the importance of your network and using these tools when you don't need them. And here are a couple of articles that you can see. Even the PBS NewsHour did a whole segment. They followed me from morning till night as I went around looking for work. And you can access all of this through the QR code you see on the screen. Or if you are on the Google Slides, you can click in on any of the articles and get a link to it. The QR code also goes to a 200 tweet thread that I've done about careers, job loss, resilience, bouncing back, all of that stuff, and I encourage you to look at it. When we talk about social media and science, there's a wonderful guide. There are many out there, but this is from the from ACS Publications, which some of you will know. The American Chemical Society has put together a scientist's guide to social media, and you can click on the image of this document and you will get to it, or you can of course Google a scientist's guide to social media, and it's very, very helpful. Jennifer Heemstra has written this. She's an associate professor of chemistry at Emory, and she shares advice on Twitter at Jen Heemstra. So I encourage you to follow her. Lots of good information on there, and it's a good place for you to learn more about social, especially the stuff that we don't cover in here. I like to say that science is made for social media and social media is made for science. But social media and the world at large is overrun by misinformation, fake science news, and charlatans. And you alone can help end this scourge. And you can do so much if you, you take the lessons we're sharing here and with some deliberation and some intentionality can decide how you want to engage with the world. I know many of you are already very active on social, do a lot on social, and you will probably agree about the value that you can bring. And we're talking at a time when there's so much misinformation, especially around the coronavirus and other things. And it's very important that scientists speak up. And in a way, it's not what most scientists are used to. Your work doesn't speak for itself anymore. The world speaks for and of your work. And it's not fair. I wish it were that your work spoke for itself, but instead it is this idea that everybody is participating with your work. And so it's important for you to master as much of this as possible. So we're going to give you some tips to help you with that. There's a former employee of Twitter who had a great line: if you're good in real life, you can be great on social. Her name is Erica Anderson, and her handle is at Erica America. So I changed that up a little bit and said, well, that's if you're good in real life, but what if, like all of you who are watching today, you're great in real life? Well, if you're great in real life, you can be awesome on social. So if you're good in real life, you can be great on social. But if you're great in real life already, you can be awesome on social. But if you're bad in real life, you don't do research well, you have bad data, you are lazy, are just not a good real life scientist, then what'll happen is you'll be awful on social. So social doesn't make who you are, it magnifies who you are. And that's the theme that I think we will come back to, especially as we go to kind of Q&A part of all of this. So let's start by thinking about the importance of knowing and conquering the scarcest resource. And I'm talking to a bunch of scientists, so you would say the scarcest resource is clean air, clean water, enough funding for our projects, time to do my research. Those are all scarce resources, but the scarcest resource is getting human attention. Getting it, keeping it, all of that really matters. And Les Hinton, the former publisher of the Wall Street Journal, had this really great line that has kind of informed and driven almost all the work I do, is thinking about this idea. How do we get and keep human attention to the work we do? There's probably nothing more important, no slide more important than this. So if you want to take a photo of this, you can, and just have it with you and kind of let it marinate in your brain. Now, when I was young, I wanted to be a millionaire, I can tell you that. And I did become a millionaire, but it wasn't unread Gmail messages. And when you look at this number, you can see the 1 million unread messages, but you also see the much sadder number, the drafts. These are the documents where I started replying, I didn't send something, or forgot to send it, something interrupted my work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so this idea that you have great content, but you have to get it to the people in the right time, in the right sequence. So I'm not showing you this because I'm important in any way. I'm showing you this to help you understand that the world is filled with this problem, that you've got great stuff, how do you get people to see it? And in a way, you'd say, well, social media is the answer, but there's also a problem with social media. And this is my dirty little secret of social media, that almost everyone will miss almost everything you do on social. Almost everyone will miss almost everything you do on social until, if you look at the bottom of the screen, until you make a mistake. Once you make a mistake, then everybody will see it. And that's so unfair, because there'll be great stuff you work on and you want everybody to see it, but very few people do. And then once you make a mistake, then more people will see it. And that's unfortunate for sure, but that is reality. So let me give you a thought on followers, because this is something that a lot of people ask me, and I know many of you will have that question for the work we're doing. How do we get more followers? And we'll talk about that in the Q&A when we talk about Twitter, et cetera. But I have this idea that on social, it's not who follows you that matters. It's who follows you that matters. What I mean is that you want large audiences, absolutely, as large as you possibly can. But you also want to get influential people following you, people who have good followers themselves, because influencing the influencers matters a lot more to me than just willy-nilly talking to everybody. Of course, it'd be great to have millions of followers, but it's so much more interesting to get specific people to follow you, and then using and leveraging their network is how I think about this. And one thought on this is to show you a tool to show you who your top 100 followers are. And that tool is called Triangulate. And here's the word on the screen. You see Triangulate. And I thought I would use Alan Alda as an example to show you how this works on this free tool, Triangulate, created by my friend Henry Copeland, who's at HC on Twitter. And by the way, if you want to give a shout out to Alan Alda, you can do that right now. I was just reflecting, he posted something about one of his friends, a director and producer of MASH, who has passed away this week. And I was remembering that when I was a young kid, arrived in America at 9 years old, one of the few TV shows I was allowed to watch was MASH. I think my folks thought there was history involved in it, which of course there was, but I laughed so hard and learned so much that's lived with me for 40 years. I tweeted about this today. And so I want to thank Glenn Reynolds, who passed away, and want to thank Alan Alda for making that show. And today, my office is inside the Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science. It's an incredible gift. Kind of only in America is this story possible, and shows you where communications and the ability to understand this technology has gotten me, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. So let's look at Alan's Twitter account. He has 176,000 followers, more than double the followers I have. But in addition to all those followers, you notice that his top 97 followers have 84 million followers behind them. And that's the power of Twitter. So of course, it's great that all of us are following him, but the fact that he has scientists and other influencers following him, people in entertainment and others, it makes a difference as he is trying to share big ideas and have an impact on the world, especially the work he's doing through things like the Alan Alda Center. And you can see his top 3 followers are Sarah Silverman, the comedian. She has 12 million followers. Mark Ruffalo, the actor, has 6 million followers. And Scientific American is following him, that has 3.8 million followers. So if we run our own accounts through this, the numbers will be very different, much smaller. But just this idea of using a tool like Triangulate and saying, who are my top 100 followers? And how do I make sure the people who aren't following me are following me, is something that you can work on. So what this will show you, who's following you and also who's not following you. And that, I think, will be helpful. So I will try to keep an eye on the questions as they come in, but if it's not urgent, I will keep going forward and ask and working through the slides. One question did come in: when you use a QR code, is the owner of the code sucking up any information, personal info or data? So QR codes are basically pointing at something, and that something is often just linking you to something else. So in my case, I have this QR code, it's on my phone, and what it's doing is pointing to my QR, my presentation, and I'm not using your data in any way, I'm not touching it. But as with anything out there that is pointing from one thing to another, there can be problems in there. And I'm sure we have scientists watching right now who can explain the real problems of many of these tools. And there are problems. But what I say is, if a tool is helps make your life better by being more convenient, then please test it out and see how it feels and how you use it and what makes sense for you. So we gave you both ways in which to access my presentation, both in through the bit.ly link, bit.ly/SreeScience, or by using the QR code. And as I said, in other countries, QR codes are very common. In America, not as much. And we have people around the world watching at least the recording, because I know people in Asia who signed up but can't watch because we're live in the middle of the night in Asia. As we think about communication and my life's work of trying to connect with people and trying to get folks to understand what's happening in the world, I arrived at these 3 qualities of the best communicators: confidence, transparency, and generosity. And those are 3 features that can help anybody be really good on any form of communication, but especially on social media. And so what I mean by that is, let's go through them very quickly. Confidence is, especially as a scientist, you can think about your confidence in your work, your expertise. One of the things that I've learned is that expertise matters more than ever in a world where everyone's posting things and everyone's got things to share. The trained scientist who knows how to share can stand taller. And that's where confidence comes in. And knowing your work and knowing the content you're sharing about, as scientists do, it makes a big difference. Transparency is about being clear about the limits of the work you're doing or what you're sharing. Where does it come from? How old is the data? Where did you find it? All of that matters when you're doing this. So confidence and transparency. And finally, generosity. Too much of social media is, look at me, look at my work, it's so fantastic. And you're not being generous and talking about other people. Point to other people. Point to other great sources of information. Give shout outs to folks. Help people understand the value of what you're sharing, and who else is sharing good material. It makes a big difference when you give that credit, when you're generous. It really comes through in social. So I encourage you to be generous, transparent, and confident in the stuff you do on social. And as I said, I'll keep my eye on the questions, and I may come back and just do a bunch of questions at the end, or we'll jump in and see where the questions are. But we really appreciate you asking questions. If you've just joined us, we are talking about social media. We're using the hashtag SreeTips, SREETIPS. My Twitter handle is @Sree. And if I don't get to all the questions now, I'll make sure I answer them on Twitter afterward. Let's think a little bit about communication. And in the magazine world and in traditional forms of communication, being clever is really important. You've seen that in the way people use puns and use images, and just try to be clever, in part to show off your smarts and in part to engage people, because that works very well in the traditional world. Here are some magazine covers that you're looking at, separated by 40, 50 years, an Esquire cover from '68 and a Rolling Stone cover from 2006. And this is where being clever has an impact, and it's very powerful. But John Huey, who ran all of Time Inc. and the magazine world, he had another take on this. He said, in digital, clear is the new clever. Clear is the new clever. So it's so important for scientists to be clear when they're communicating, to speak in the simplest, clearest terms about what they are talking about. It's sometimes hard for my scientist friends because they know so much, and they want to convince you of the strength of their argument. And that's fine, but that is not the way that you can be successful on social all the time. Of course, there are times when you can be more sophisticated in the way you're communicating. But I want to make the case, as John does, that clear is the new clever. So in email communications, in your Twitter, in your Facebook, everywhere you're posting, just think about how you can be as clear as possible. Why? Because things like search engine optimization, the robots read these things and decide what to serve up, what to share, etc. So that matters. The other reason that you want to be clear is that folks who are going to take your content and then share it with the world are only going to do that if the content is clear. Now, if you are doing micro communications, you're sharing with just a few people, then you're talking peer-to-peer, you can be as jargony as you want. But when you're online and your goal is to reach as many people as possible, reach out and bring people in, you want to try to be as clear as you can. Another thing to think about is the importance of telling a story and telling lots of stories in the work you're doing and humanizing your work and telling people what it is that they're looking at and who it is they're looking at and why people should care. And I was inspired about this by this book by Priya Parker. And Priya wrote this book called The Art of Gathering: How We Meet and Why It Matters. And that is why I have conferences and events that I host myself in person, because there's still a value of being together. Of course, these webinars work to some extent and they're useful, but being together is really important. What I learned in the classroom, the magic of the classroom, as a professor and 50 students, 20 students, etc. And when I worked at the Metropolitan Museum, the magic was you and a piece of art in a gallery. If you can't do that, that's when all the digital stuff comes in. And so telling stories about what we do, how you do it, and connecting the digital and the traditional work is very, very important as we go out in the world. It's also important to think about visuals. You know, we almost everything I've said so far, you might be thinking is about words. A lot of it's words, but it's also about visuals. And so let's all get better at visuals. And so I have some tools and tips here. Again, I hope you're taking lots of notes and sharing the tweets as we give out some of these tips so that people can follow. One of the things that happens is people are on their phones all day doing kind of scrolling on their phones with their thumbs all day. And so I coined this term, the Thumbstopper. And the question is, can you make sure that with everything you're posting a Thumbstopper? It could be a photo, could be an image, could be a GIF, could be an animation, a map, a video, any of those things, but post something so that you get people's attention. And here you see, I wrote about my dear friend Mitra Kalita, who is now she's had multiple promotions since this was 4 years ago. And instead of just saying congratulations, I used this tool called Pic Collage to make a little collage to go with what I posted about her. And there are so many tools, Pic Collage, Canva, etc., that can help you do some of this. And I encourage you to think about how you can use these various tools. Another tool I like as a Thumbstopper is the TypeORama app, which allows you to put words on text very easily. There's another tool called VideoRama that allows you to do videos on text. So thinking about ways in which you can make your images stand out is really important. I used TypeORama in this photograph of a diary of some kind of moleskin and just wrote on it with TypeORama for the birthday of William Wordsworth. Here's another kind of fun thing you can do. This is my wife on vacation in Italy. She said 3 things I love: the Renaissance, the gelato, and the wine. That's what she loves about Italy. I posted that. And by the way, people think that whatever you post, everyone's seeing, and not everyone does. So I encourage you to take your best stuff and repost it, reshare it. Thinking about when you're posting matters as much as what you're posting. And so I reposted this, and then I posted another time, and I said, at least she didn't say the men of Italy. And so you can also have some kind of fun with the content you're sharing. I should tell you, I spend 3 to 6 to 10 minutes on everything I put on the internet. Why? Because social media is the only thing I do today that can get me divorced today. Social media is the only thing I do today can get me fired today. And everything you do on social lives forever, which is not necessarily other things I do. So thinking about how you can use these tools, but also how you can be really careful in what you're posting and when you're posting it really matters. Another tool to do GIFs is IMG Play or GiphyCam. And you should know that my colleague and dear friend, the former chief digital officer of Harvard University, Perry Hewitt, created a Giphy channel. Giphy is like the YouTube of GIFs for Harvard, so that when they sent out, especially their scientific topics, press releases, she would attach, or they would attach a GIF to get the attention of journalists and others. And so whenever anybody asks me, how do you do innovative work out in the world? I'll say nothing I do is as innovative or as surprising as Harvard having its own Giphy channel. So it's all kind of relative as you think about this. Here are some more tools. You can just take a screenshot of this or take your camera and take a photo. These are a whole bunch of different tools that can help you be better at using social with your cameras and creating social media content and just kind of having fun with it. So take a photo of this and then you can use it to practice and get used to doing stuff on your phone. I spend way too much time on my phone. If you look at your screen time stats, if you ever see mine, you'll see I'm posting way too much and on my phone way too much. I use my phone on an average of 12 to 14 hours a day. And that's because I prefer using my phone to my laptop. And the reason for that is that we create great content on these beautiful laptops or 3 monitors, double monitors, etc. But our audiences are consuming it on their phones. And so the content's much better when you can create it in the format that people consume it. And that's why I encourage you to be better at these apps and tools and all of that. And if you take a picture of this, you can use this. I want to make a special shout out to Hyperlapse that you see on your screen. That's an Apple iOS app that gives you the steadiest time lapse that you can make. And especially the work of science lends itself to both hyperlapse or time lapse pictures and video, as well as slow motion video that you can capture with your Android or your iPhone, and they will be helpful to you. So now let's talk about the importance of working on your social. We're going to give you some very concrete, specific tips. But before that, I'm going to ask our colleague Jamie to give us a poll so that you can all participate and give us some feedback as we're going along here. All right, so you see the poll on the screen, and we'll give you a few seconds. We'll see how people are voting on this. And it's kind of fun that these numbers are going up dramatically. Look at that. We asked people to vote, and 250 people have a chance to vote here. Let's see how many vote there. We got 1 vote for 4 votes for Snapchat, 1 vote for WeChat, few for YouTube, Pinterest, Instagram, really strong. Twitter, science Twitter is huge, as you can see. Let's get those last 40 people in, 50 people in, folks. So I'll give you another 30 seconds or so. It'll be great to get your input on here. Here's a chance for Instagram's catching up, but may not make it. Depends. This feels a little bit like the Iowa caucuses, quite frankly. It's so tense as we get to this. Facebook is still behind. I'm going to actually, while you're still voting, I'm just going to look at one of the questions that came in. Let's see here. It's actually a question about Facebook, and it says, I've increasingly lost enthusiasm for Facebook after watching The Great Hack. I really detest it and distrust it. Sree, is there no one else you can host, nowhere else you can host these groups? Is it Facebook or nothing? So it's a serious question about Facebook's role in our times and what is happening in the world, and its role in everything from democracy to fundraising. And so it's very important for us to think about the tools that we use. As scientists, we're ethical folks. We care about doing good in the world. And it's important that we raise these questions about the platforms we use. And if you're totally not on Facebook, I understand. If you're boycotting it or you're just not interested in it, I understand. But if you're open to using it, there are ways in which you can use Facebook for the best parts for you. And so I would suggest that my Facebook group just is a convenient place where the conversation's taking place. And there's no reason that I can't have a similar one in LinkedIn. And I have multiple groups where I participate, including Twitter DM groups and LinkedIn and all of those. None of them are as easy to use and have been as improved as Facebook groups. And so that's one of the reasons why I still do a lot on Facebook group. And we're talking specifically about my Sree's Advanced Social Media. So if you just go into Facebook and type in Sree_S Advanced Social, you can you can see that group that's there. You can ask to join. But I do encourage you to use the tools that are most convenient and comfortable for you. And there's also a lot of people doing things on WhatsApp groups, but guess who owns that? That's also Facebook. So that's sort of the world we're in at the moment. And I totally understand people who are dissatisfied and unhappy with Facebook. The first World Delete Facebook Day was in 2010. So 10 years ago, people started boycotting Facebook, and Facebook has only grown immensely in size since then. A word about WhatsApp. Thank you all for participating in here. We could have thrown in some other apps, including WhatsApp and Weibo and others, but you can see that this is a very American-centric conversation because it's at 3 p.m. in the afternoon on Eastern time. But otherwise, if we had more people from Asia and other places, I'm sure we'd see more WeChat and other tools. And look at TikTok, really interesting that TikTok on this chart anyways at 4 people out of 250. It's something that's getting a lot of buzz and attention. Doesn't mean people are actually using it or that it's their favorite. So we could have had another way to rank this. So you're going to get the webinar exit poll a little later, but it just happens to be on screen for now. But we're going to not launch that poll right now. We definitely want your feedback, but not at the moment. So let me see if I can close that out, and let's work on your social. And let me start by giving you 4 things that social media can do for you. It can help you find new ideas, trends, and opportunities. It can help you connect with audiences in deeper ways and help bring eyeballs, traffic, and attention to your work and help create, craft, and enhance your brand. I feel that all nonprofits, all folks who work in the scientific world do some elements of this, but nobody does all of these together. And that's the opportunity. The people I work with as a consultant, when I go and look at other organizations, I start with this document and saying, what are you doing to participate in all 4 of these things? And most people do 1 or 2 really well, but very, very few people do all 4. And that's something you can think about for your personal work or for the work of your institution. And I think it will make a difference. Social media does good stuff. It also does bad stuff. You all know the term FOMO, fear of missing out, loneliness. You can insert any societal crisis in there. It also is responsible for tech neck, which is your neck, which is the weight of a bowling ball, kind of dragging because of your head is pulling on your neck, and you're having kind of neck and back and other issues. And so I hope those of you who are stuck at a computer all day are doing a lot of standing and are doing things to not make the problems worse. And by the way, when you're on your phone under the desk at a meeting, at a table in a conference table, you're under the desk, you're putting your phone under the desk and texting. Everybody knows you're texting, so why not pull the phone up and just go ahead and make sure that you are not hurting yourself in the process. By the way, these 2 guys you see on screen are my Bitmoji avatars, and you may know Bitmoji, very popular way of making these guys. I like them because I like this particular Bitmoji because this guy's about 10 pounds lighter and has much better hair than I do, but you can customize your Bitmoji, of course. One of the things to also understand is that social is hard. Everybody thinks social is easy. I once posted something with Jim Acosta from CNN, and I got 185,000 impressions, and that's a lot of impressions. So I was sure I'd get a lot of followers. It'd be an amazing tweet, and I got 1 new follower. And what does that tell you? That just having all that attention is not enough. For those of you old enough to remember Seinfeld, there's an episode where somebody desperately wants to get Jerry Seinfeld to wear her puffy shirt on the Today Show, because if he wears the puffy shirt on the Today Show, everybody will see it and she'll make lots of money. Well, I've been on the Today Show dozens of times and none of you have ever seen me. And that's because everyone's too busy. There's just too much going on. And the same thing, just getting 1 tweet out there is not enough. You have to participate. You have to be part of the conversation to be successful. One day I posted something about 225 new followers, and I thought that was really good, and I was excited about it, but I also got 158 unfollowers, including somebody I gave a job to, who I helped, and he unfollowed me. And so I can barely look at the screen without getting mad, which tells you that it's hard to figure out what works on social. So imagine having a day where you post good enough content that you get all these followers. You also get those many unfollowers when you're posting the same content. And that can drive you crazy, of course. So let's talk about each of the platforms and give you some quick tips on each of them. On Facebook, I want us to think about 4 quick things. Facebook, the legacy contact feature, groups, see first, and live. The Facebook legacy contact allows you to give someone in your life access to Facebook to turn it into an in memoriam page when you pass away. And you may think, well, you're never going to pass away. But I organized 2 funerals in 2016. In both cases, different ages, they didn't have this feature, and it made the life of their loved ones at a terrible time even worse. So please do the Facebook legacy contact. So quick suggestions: do the Facebook legacy contact, just Google it and you'll be able to do it. Number 2, please warn the person before you do it, because they shouldn't think you're dying. Number 3, don't make me your Facebook legacy contact. Every time I do one of these sessions, somebody smart aleck and says, oh, you really care about this, I'm going to make you the legacy contact. So don't do that, please. But please do Facebook legacy contact, very important. Facebook groups we talked about already. There are now learning units inside Facebook groups so that you can share almost like a learning module of things you want people in your group to go through one by one. And the groups are getting better and smarter and sharing more insights, so you can check those out. And then I want to tell you about the See First feature, which you're seeing right here with my wife. So click on anybody that you're following, any business or personal account. And when you click on them, you can choose. When you click on the word following, you click on it and you can say, do you want to see first, or do you want it to be on default? You can pick up to 30 people that you can see first before you see everybody else. So if you work at a big scientific organization, imagine if everybody is part of their online or onboarding or HR, whatever, they all were told to please do this. It'd be a great way for everyone to see the content and to understand your content. What I find at big organizations is that people who work for these organizations aren't seeing or sharing the content of the organizations. And so this is an opportunity for all of you to think about making sure you can beat the algorithm. If one of the things you're mad about Facebook is the algorithm, well, there's a chance for you to defeat the algorithm, because you can have up to 30 brands or people whose content you see first. I'm sorry. And also there's Facebook Live that I will talk about in a minute. Let's talk about Twitter. And before we go to Twitter, I'm just going to very quickly look at my notes to see if there are any questions out there. So many diverse social media platforms. How many is it important to be on? Better to be on one well, or try to be on multiple platforms? Very good question. Thank you for that. I would say it really depends on your tolerance and ability to do all these things. It's very hard to do even one social media platform well. And of course, if you can knock it out of the park on one, that's great. But find the tool that's being used in your community the most. Different types of scientists have different circles they're operating in, and different platforms that work for them. So really think about what's best for you and what are you comfortable on. And really, you should be creating content and then repurposing and resharing it. Not exactly the same everywhere, because every platform has its own language, its own feel, its own etiquette. And so you want to vary that. But basically, you don't have to create brand new content for every single platform all the time. And we want you to be more efficient in the stuff you're doing. So I encourage you to think about that. So let's talk about a little bit about branding, and how you extend your digital footprint is partly literally what is the face you're showing the world. And on Twitter, there are multiple ways in which you can connect with the world. And so first is your Twitter handle. Make sure, not the name, but the handle, and that's the handle that you see here. Make sure it's memorable, and even if it's not short, it doesn't matter, but is it memorable? Is it associated with you in some way, or can it be associated with you in some way, is something you can think about. Second is your Twitter name. I've obviously taken my name and made it this really long thing because I'm trying to promote Social Media Weekend, but you could, anytime you go to a conference, I suggest you turn your name, not your handle, make the hashtag of your conference. When you do that, then when people search the conference, your tweets come up high, you come up high on the feed. So that's why changing your name like this and making it fluid, and whatever project you're working on, you can add and change your name, not your handle. That you don't want to change. Maybe once you want to change it, but otherwise you want to make sure you stick to your handle. Another way to brand is through the photograph, and it's very important to have a clear, recognizable photo of you. By the way, I feel like sometimes a doctor who smokes, I tell you, I smoke and I say, don't smoke, but that's what it's sort of here. I'm saying, make sure it's a picture of you. Here I have a picture of me and Steve Van Zandt, who I'm a big fan of. And some of you will know who he is, the actor, the musician, the human rights activist. And so I got a picture with him, so I have it there. But it's much better to have a clear, recognizable face of your face. And then the background shot, the image header. A lot of platforms have this, and it's a way for you to, again, do some extra branding here. I've got the Stony Brook brand on there behind me. So thinking about how that works is really important. Also, your bio really matters. This is where you want to be super clear about who you are and what you do. When a bunch of you have started following me in the last day or so because of the conference, because of the webinar, and I look at every single person. I decide I have 10 seconds, 5 seconds to decide to follow that person or not. And I look at their bio, look at what they're linking to, who they are. All of that helps me decide whether to follow you or not. So this is a good time for what I call an effective bio makeover. So if you haven't done it already, please make a note to make your bios clearer, and look at all the organizations I'm involved with. I have made them all hyperlinked by making them blue, using the @ signs. Instead of saying I teach at Stony Brook journalism, I put in SBU journalism and the @ sign, so that Twitter learns who I'm associated with. So when someone follows SBU journalism, now there's a chance they may be served up. I may be served up to Twitter as someone to follow along with that account. So if you can make your Twitter handle blue like this with the things that you want to be associated with, then people are more likely to find you, and you're more likely to be served up as you go there. And it's always good to have a website. Academics have their university websites or other things. I have my LinkedIn. You can use anything you like, but it's good to have a website that you're pointing people to. You're actually seeing my full date of birth on there. That's because this is obviously from my screen and my account. Otherwise, you can just have your birthday. You don't have to have anything, but you don't have to tell everybody your entire birth date the way I have done here, and you can see. And I also want to make a point, when people look at my account, they say, oh, you have a lot of followers. Almost no one ever talks about the following. And I'm following a lot of people, and people ask me, how do you keep up with all of them? And why are you following all these people? Well, there are so many interesting people in the world, and I believe all of us at any point could be following 50 new people that we're not. So I encourage you to think about ways in which you can add to who you're listening to on social, not just broadcasting, but who are you listening to on social? Who are the folks that can help your feed get better? But if you follow so many people, one of the things you want to learn how to use are the lists on Twitter. And what the Twitter lists allow you to do is to create. So I have at least 100 lists on different topics. I have sports. I have people in Boston. So when the Boston bombing happened a few years ago, I click on that and I see what's the conversation in Boston. I have doctors who tweet. So I click on that and I can see the conversation among doctors who tweet. These lists can be public or they can be private. I have a list of people with effective Twitter bios. I have 2,000 people listed on there, and that's a public list. But I also have a list called A1, where it's just for me, and this is when I'm in between meetings or I get off a plane, I go right onto A1 and I see the ones that matter to me. So that could be my spouse, my boss, other people in your life. Who are the people you absolutely must hear from? That's how you can help tune down tune out some of the noise and make it more helpful in what you're doing. So I always think about that. Facebook allows you to do the same thing with these lists on Facebook. So definitely try that for sure. So those are some of my Twitter ideas. Also get good at making pinned tweets, because pinning a tweet tells you who you should be, what is the most important thing to you at the moment. So often people don't have pinned tweets. It's another way to build your brand, that I go in there and I just see a whole bunch of retweets or tweets of other people or your own tweets. And I don't know, what is the most important thing to you at the moment? And that's a way of emphasizing something. It could be 6 months old, 6 weeks old, but whatever's most important, make sure that pinned tweet stays there and you think about it in what you're doing. Before I leave Twitter, I'm going to go in and see the questions here. And let's see, question came in. This is a question about words on an image tend to limit reach. So this was about, I had mentioned earlier that you can put text on images. And if you ever try to promote a post from Twitter, sorry, on Instagram, which has words on it, to buy an ad and say you want to boost it, Instagram will tell you that fewer people are going to see it because they want it to be, just have less text on it. That's their thing. But I have seen very successful images with text on it. It's all about being reasonable about this, right? So experiment, become a student of your own social media and try things. These algorithms keep changing. So what works today may not work tomorrow, and what doesn't work today may work tomorrow. So just get better at experimenting and trying new things as you go forward. So let's keep going. Let's talk a little bit about Instagram. There's so much going on Instagram. It's become so popular, and it's continued to grow in its importance, in the way the world is connecting with it. Here again, multiple ways in which you can interact with the world by being very clear about who you are. By the way, a word about your profile photo. If you use the same profile photo in Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, then when someone is searching for you from Twitter and looks on Instagram, they'll find you much easier, especially if you have not a absolutely unique name. And I know that helped me just the other day. I was looking for somebody on Facebook. There were so many people. Luckily, she had used a very striking photo, memorable photo in both places. So I knew that was her, even though there were so many people there. A few quick Instagram tips that I'm just going to go through. Be very clear on your bio. Make sure, again, you're linking to something so people can find out what you're linking to. Become good at doing Instagram stories because they're really popular. Yesterday, if you go to my Instagram, you can create these highlights, as you see the round circles across the under your bio. Those are really good ways to engage with the world. I had more than 1,000 views of each photo within hours, and that was only because of the power of stories. And people are just sitting on their phone and just kind of clicking, and just spending lots of time instead of doing their work. They're on Instagram. And Instagram is also a great place to show off your expertise and the things you're interested in, the things you're doing, but also to have some fun. I was in Chattanooga this week for the very first time, and so I posted something, a delicious cake called a gooey butter cake, and that got a lot of response. And I have fun with our dog Tara, who has her own Instagram, of course. She's the.tara on Instagram if you want to follow her. But what I've also learned about Instagram and all of this is that one of the things they're doing is trying to depressurize social media, and they have now limited your exposure to how many people's statistics, how many people like your photos, and don't show that to other people. So that has immediately reduced the tension around Instagram. When my now teenagers were in middle school, if you in their class, it was really common that if you didn't get 100 likes on your post, you would delete it because you were so ashamed. If I get 100 likes on a post, I throw a party because it's not easy to get 100 likes. But in middle school, it's very different. And so now by removing those likes, they've reduced the pressure. And anything we can do to reduce the pressure and the problems around social that result from that, I'm a big champion of. Again, experimenting and making these Instagram stories, I think, is very effective in the various things that we're trying to get done as folks who are using these tools. I just want to give a shout out to the importance of live tools. I use Facebook Live, but there's also Instagram Live, Twitter Live, or Periscope, YouTube Live, LinkedIn Live. So 5 different live tools that you can use for free, and they're really important. One of the things I do with my friend Neil Parekh is every Sunday morning, 8:30 a.m. Eastern, I read aloud the Sunday New York Times, sometimes with people from the New York Times, including the travel editor of the New York Times and others. And we did this with the Washington Post as well. So every Sunday morning, 8:30, and we just read the print paper. And you can imagine, as scientists, you could do that for some of the things you're working on. People love behind the scenes. People love getting information about what you're doing. And that's so easy to do on Facebook Live and tools like it. So definitely experiment, play with it. I just did it as on a lark, and it's now year 5 that we've just started of the New York Times read along, as we call it. And we have a community around the world that watches not just on Facebook, but also on LinkedIn Live, which is slowly rolling out. So we use a platform called StreamYard that does both at the same time, and we can upload onto YouTube. So we have effectively tripled our audience by using these tools and playing around with them. As we get ready for the last half hour and making sure we get lots of questions and answer as many of your questions, I want to spend time on LinkedIn. But before I do that, I'm just going to look on here and see some of the questions. Here, just very quickly, I'm looking at the questions. If you're with a research institute, what are your thoughts on only using scientific content on social media? I think it'd be okay to use non-scientific content every once in a while. Absolutely. Show stuff behind the scenes. Show the people of the scientific institution. People don't follow brands, they want to follow people. And even their great institutions they love, they want to see the people who make it possible. They want to see what you're doing, how it's done, where it's done. And having that behind the scenes makes a big difference. And posting things that show you're part of the zeitgeist, posting, let's say it's National Pizza Day, and people are eating pizza in your cafeteria. You can make some kind of joke about the science of the pizza or whatever it is. You're much better at this than me. But I would definitely think about ways of doing that. Somebody said, you mentioned science Twitter, or like there is, comics Twitter, and there is, there's India Twitter. There are all these different subgroups, but they're all, they're just on the internet and on Twitter. So they're not necessarily separate. You can find them through hash. I once did a workshop at the National Association Journalists, and it was all about Black Twitter. And so these are communities. There's movie Twitter. So anytime that people care about something, there's a Twitter for that. So I'm sure there's biology Twitter and medical Twitter and all of that you can find. And you find it by looking at hashtags or looking at people and institutions around those topics, and you can easily find them. And if you have recommendations, throw them in the chat. I'm sure others would like this. If you have time to address it, how do you connect with people who work for government agencies and these sites are blocked and only can be seen on a personal device? Really good question. And it sort of leads into our LinkedIn conversation. And this is why I really want everybody to be better at LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is typically not blocked. Even in China, the government of China, which blocks Facebook and Google and all this stuff, does not block LinkedIn for 2 reasons. They want it they know it's a good place to recruit non-Chinese folks to work for Chinese companies, and for Chinese folks to work for multinational companies. And so they've left LinkedIn alone. And similar thing in the government, they may block your TikTok and other things. By the way, TikTok's also a Chinese website, but you can think about where you can participate with LinkedIn and other things that may not be as easily blocked or as often blocked as some of the social networks. So thank you for that question. So if we were all together and ask everyone who's on LinkedIn, and every hand will go up, and then say who's really good at LinkedIn, and almost every hand will go down. And that's because people are just not comfortable on LinkedIn because they don't use it. They think it's a job hunting tool, but it is much more than that. I don't think anyone uses it as much as it could or we should, including me. And I'm a big champion of LinkedIn. I first wrote an article about the importance of LinkedIn in 2004. So 16 years ago, I've been pushing this LinkedIn thing because I believe in its value for everyone. And I so often say it's underappreciated that people tweet about me saying it's underappreciated. So it's kind of a meta thing here, but it's really important for us to think about LinkedIn before we need it, before you have the emergency, before you lose your job, before you run into issues. One of the things that we're doing a session in May at Princeton University for graduate students, all these experts, and helping them think about their grad futures beyond traditional academic jobs. And we're encouraging people to work on their LinkedIn accounts now. I will say that I want every 16-year-old in America, in the world, to have a LinkedIn account and learn to use it. It's not a job hunting tool, it's a career management tool that you'll use the rest of your life. And by the way, to give you a sense, Microsoft bought LinkedIn for $26 billion. Mark Zuckerberg bought Instagram for $1 billion. So that gives you a sense of the range of how much the social media stuff has become more important for all of us. Here's an example of the power of LinkedIn, just incredible. I posted something, and Dr. Sue Desmond-Hellmann, who is the CEO of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, very kindly posted something, and we're not even connected, but she posted this, and it just shows you the value of this, that serious, important people are on LinkedIn. And we could all be doing more around LinkedIn. And there's an article about science, as you can see. This page was buried, this story was buried on A25 of the print New York Times. But of course, with the internet, it goes much, can be seen much wider. One of the beautiful things about LinkedIn is the stats you get. I got 5,000 views on this, or 10 comments, which are reasonable. It's very good. I'm pleased. But for a lot of big companies, that's not a lot. But look why this matters. 13 people at the New York Times saw it, 14 people at the Met, 216 CEOs saw this content, 150 founders, so 192 journalists. So now you can see what kind of people are seeing your content. And that's so helpful to you. I started by saying it's great to have millions of people follow you, but having the right few people follow you is as important, or if not even more important, depending on what we're doing, especially in science and other things where you have to do fundraising and you have to do friend raising and you have to connect with the world. You want to be thinking about this for sure. You also, when you post things on LinkedIn, you can see the stats, you can see people jump onto things, they participate. Here I posted a simple question: when you see a resume with a Hotmail address, what do? Do you treat them the same as others? Do you reject them other way? Some other response, I got hate mail for this. Thousands of people looked at it. You can see 300,000 people saw this, and people wrote articles about this, and it became a thing on the internet because I asked a simple question. The funny part is all these people are defending Hotmail, whereas Microsoft itself is no longer defending Hotmail, and they're pushing the live.com and outlook.com addresses. And it was just fascinating to kind of see how people reacted to it. I want to make the case that LinkedIn is underappreciated. Here's a list of all the biggest social media networks. And you can see, by the way, how much noise there is around Facebook. And of course, Facebook has a big impact. YouTube does as well. But look at Twitter. So much noise around Twitter. And it's so small. It punches above its weight because so many politicians are on it. Celebrities are on it. Controversial people are on it. But even TNW, which is a terrific website that I read all the time, very helpful in the digital space, forgot to put in LinkedIn. So I'm going to show you where LinkedIn is. First, think for a second, where do you think on this link LinkedIn is? I should tell you, by the way, we're meeting today when WhatsApp announced that it's at 2 billion users itself. So that's a big day. I think WhatsApp is really important. It's a different kind of communications device and tool and platform. But I think there's lots of potential for good and bad on certainly there, as it is on all the other platforms as well. So without further ado, here's where we are with LinkedIn, right? Seeing this, some of you may have guessed higher or lower, but just shows you this is the one place where every working professional in the world can join and will join over time. And that's why it's important. So I think there's a lot of upside in learning and using LinkedIn. People often ask me, what is my LinkedIn strategy? And I tell you, you need one. And my strategy is as follows. I connect with people I already know, people I should know, and people I'd like to know. So people I already know, people I should know, and people I'd like to know. So think about that and then connect. And I hope you'll all connect with me on LinkedIn. And we can all benefit from this if we have a strategy, because if you connect with people who don't fit one of these things, you're going to find that LinkedIn is less useful to you and therefore less useful to your audience and the people you connect with. So that's really important. And then I want you to focus on three things in your LinkedIn: your photo, your headline, and your about section. Your photo, your headline, your about section. Your photo, again, you want it to be as clear as you can, and nice tight shot of your face. Your headline is where you don't have to follow chronological order. You don't have to say you're the third assistant vice assistant to the regional manager. You can be aspirational in your headline. You can describe the industry you're in, what you're aspiring scientist, you can have words like that, and you can be a little more aspirational in your headline. But in your about section, also, you don't have to be in chronological order. That's several paragraphs you can write about yourself if you really wanted to, and that's something you can do. So just looking at LinkedIn here for a second. This is obviously not LinkedIn, but on my feed here, I'm just going to go in here and click on my LinkedIn so you can see it. You can see that you have your photo, your header image. You have your section here that we call our the headline. So you can say things there in your headline. And then you can also say, this is not, you can say what you're open to. So I say I'm open to consulting, whatever, speaking, etc. And you can describe that in there. And then the about page, so important, the about section. Mine is way too long and complicated, but yours can be shorter, but you can see how much white space there is and those paragraph returns. It matters. And you can also put in links to anything on the internet. You can click in and people can see what are the things that you have posted on there, things you're interested in, articles, something someone's written about you, project you worked on. Here's an example of a wonderful project at the Met that combines science and technology. The Temple of Dendur, we worked with the Egyptologists to do projection mapping of what the original colors of the Temple of Dendur were. Ancient Egypt was not beige, it was more like Google colors. And this was a huge success and really interesting, and you can read about that. So I even went in and found my original 1992 recommendation letter that got me into Columbia Journalism School. Why? Just so that I can show you that you can do things like this and you can put them online and people can, I look very serious in that photograph, but you can do that in your about section and in other places. And you can describe your experience, and you can put your education, you can put your licenses, your certificates, your volunteer experience, all of this you can do, and your recommendations. So important, getting recommendations, giving recommendations, not to the same people. You don't want these back scratch recommendations, and you can put other stuff in here. So I just wanted to show you all that. And that's what I was saying. Focus on your photo, headline, and your about section. Again, you're thinking about branding. And in your resume section, you want to do jobs, education, awards, interests, and you can upload PDFs or links to the work you've done. This is much more professional, so people will care about it in the circles you move in. Let's look at the owner of, or the CEO of the company that owns LinkedIn, Microsoft. You can see very clear. He describes his about is very clear. His mission is to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. Not all of us have the same mission, but we have some version of that mission, and as scientists, and you can be very clear about in that. And then you can also see here, you can describe where you work, what you've done, and also where you've gone to school. What is so interesting here is that he went to an undergraduate school most Americans have not heard of. He went to great organizations, schools you have heard of for grad school, and you can see that really my lesson from the workspaces is what you do with the schools you go to. That's really important. So let's talk about a couple of different things on LinkedIn. Recommendations, they're different from doing an endorsement, and you want to ask for them in real time when finishing a project. Whenever someone says to me, hey, that was great, I say, thank you. Can you tell LinkedIn? Thanks for telling me, I appreciate it, but I'd much more appreciate it if you told LinkedIn. So get into the habit of getting those recommendations. Otherwise, if you wait two years, those people have forgotten you and the project and everything you did. So try to do that whenever you can. Now, skills and endorsements are different, but they are really important now. They've become important. I used to poo-poo the importance of these endorsements and skills especially, but that's changed. And here are the consequences of that, the machine learning consequences, the AI consequences. So here are two applicants looking at the same job, and you can see for several, one has more matches and one has fewer. You can imagine who's going to get the call, who's the computer going to encourage the recruiter to call. It's going to be the person on the right. And the secret is that both of them are me. I went in and edited my skills to make sure they match this. I didn't lie. These are all skills I have. You can have up to 50 skills, but making sure the right ones are displayed for the right jobs matters. And that's something that I did in here, and I learned the value of this. People often ask me, what kind of content can I share on LinkedIn? And there are two ways to do it, where you can write it like a status update, sort of like Facebook, you get more views, or you can write an article like a blog. So you can do both of those. And if you're not sure of what to post, this is my attitude towards this stuff. If Instagram and Facebook are for showing off your life, all those cocktails and all the beaches you're on, think of LinkedIn as showing off your expertise. Twitter, the same way, showing off your expertise rather than your fabulous life. That's something you can do there. Also, a lot of people ask me about the paid account, and I recommend having it, especially when you're job hunting or you're working on a project trying to get funds, etc. You can upgrade and downgrade after a month, and it's some $30-something, and you're trying to get a lot more money than that for your job or your fundraising for your project. So InMail has more impact. That's what you get. You get 15 free InMails if you pay for the paid account. So you can think about that. You get access to more data, and you can try LinkedIn Learning as well through that. So I'm going to pause here and look through the many, many, many questions that have come in, and I'll just try to do rapid fire as many of questions as possible. But the ones I miss, I will answer on Twitter, on my handle at Sree, and using the Sree Tips hashtag. So please join us there. Okay, question. Social media experts express the same as Sree just did, that they're on their phone all day. I hear a lot of you have to live your life on the phone, always making sure that you're photographing, etc. Is it possible to be successful on social media without sinking so much time into it? Thank you. Great question. This is my job, so I do this stuff. I tell people if social media was easy, I would be out of work. Fortunately, social media is just complicated enough that it can be tantalizingly easy to get started on, but frustratingly hard to master. And that's where folks like me make a living. But to your question, absolutely, there are ways to do it with much less time sink by not getting trapped in the various time sink aspects of LinkedIn, of social, of Twitter, all of this stuff. And you can do that by making sure that you are engaged in being as efficient as possible by doing one of the things why you want to do it on the phone is you're sitting in bus rides, you're waiting for the train, you're waiting at a doctor's office. If you become versatile and skilled at sharing on the go, that's not time where you have to sit down at your desk and do your social. So that's one way to think about it. And there are tools like Hootsuite and others that allow you to post on multiple platforms, and you have to do that judiciously. All things you have to do kind of carefully on this as you're going forward. So we're just going to go through any questions. Any tips for striking a balance between serious and fun, quirky posts? I deal with geohazards communication and have to be careful about not trivializing content. Absolutely. The way I would do it is, you can have fun with serious content, meaning you're showing some personality, you're showing some of the knowledge you have and your the way you communicate. You can have some fun with it, but you're still sharing real, accurate, relevant information. If I were in the science comms business, I would never trivialize what I'm doing, because what is a joke at that moment that works in a room, that works in a conference, etc., just on the internet doesn't work. And we have seen it blow up on people, and people lose their jobs and things like that, which can definitely be a problem. I've seen more and more MDs on TikTok. Can you talk a little bit about where you think TikTok is going for the scientific community? Thanks for the question. And the New York Times had an article on MDs on TikTok, and you can search that and find it. I would say that that you have to decide who the audience is that you're trying to reach. You don't have a lot of time, so pick the things that make the most sense. How many of the moms and fathers who are making decisions about which doctor to go to are on TikTok? In your case, maybe a lot, but in maybe another case, not so much. So I would focus on the basics, on building your strengths on the platforms where people make the buying decisions, the purchasing decisions, the funding decisions, etc. And then have elements of that. And you can take TikTok and put it on Facebook. You can take TikTok and put it on Instagram. So you can do things like that. You can, multitask with the content. But again, even though I'm on TikTok, I'm not using it to make any purchasing decisions yet. But I am using Instagram sometimes to make purchasing decisions, where 5 years ago I wasn't doing that on Instagram. So these things evolve and they change. Do you have any thoughts on cultivating a game plan for crisis communication on social media? Absolutely important. Out in California at the big San Mateo County healthcare system, we did a presentation, a workshop on all kinds of social stuff. And by the way, I want to give a shout out to Doug Levy, who has done a really good book about crisis communications that incorporates a lot of social media. And also want to give a shout out to my friends at the San Mateo County Health System, including Diana and Preston and others who really understand that social media has a relevant role to play. And partly what you're doing is all year you're sharing timely, informative, useful content. And then when the crisis comes, your audience is primed, they know to trust you, and they turn to you. And that's where this can make a big, big difference. Why not use YouTube for your read-alongs and other live events? We are starting to use that. There isn't a lot of live audience for me yet on YouTube myself, but it's a great archiving platform, and you will see me use it more and more on YouTube, and I'll be doing more. And again, it depends on where you are when you're doing this. Does a social media presence help when publishing? And so there's a question for getting tenure and other things that people care about. One of the things that I have seen is on Google Scholar and other places, making your Google Scholar page really visible and accessible, almost like a social media platform, so that other people know you've written these things. And you could be in a journal, but in a kind of an obscure journal. Also, Carl Zimmer, the science writer who many of you know, he's talked about how he's gotten assignments based on his blog and his activity on social media. So that's something that has a lot of opportunity. And but would I do social media over actually writing the journal piece? Absolutely not. Social is just a layer on top of the great work you're already doing. Using LinkedIn account for a training program, for example, setting up the account to connect with the alumni. Yes, you can create a company page and an individual page, but that company page then gets all the alumni to join, and then that's a snowball effect, because people are using it more and more people are seeing it, and more people join your LinkedIn business page, as they call it. How do you keep your professional persona separate from your personal one, especially for platform when you're personally on for a while? Very difficult. It's really hard to have those separate things, because what's going to happen is your boss is going to friend you on Facebook, even though you'll say, wait a minute, Twitter is where I do my professional stuff, or LinkedIn is where I do my professional stuff. But that's just not the way the world is anymore. It's hard to maintain more than one account, more than one personality. So if you're willing to share on a regular basis, just being very careful with what you're sharing, who you're sharing with, and putting those those communities that you can narrow down in your status updates is something you can do on that. Any advice for maintaining separate professional versus a lab group? Do I need separate email accounts? Depending on the system, you need separate emails, but also you can log in and have multiple accounts on your Facebook, on your Instagram, etc. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you can do all that, but very easy to make a mistake. We've seen people fired over posting something on their personal account, but doing it on the main account by mistake. Are you aware of any movement to create government authoritative sites or certifications on social media platforms, or preference for unboosted government posts to spread official information? This is such a good topic, and I'd love to dwell on this and dive into this with any of you separately or at another forum. I think this coronavirus has taught us that we have to trust the government when it speaks about the medical stuff. But that means we have to trust the government when it speaks about everything. And without getting political about any one country, we have seen multiple countries where you cannot trust the government every day. So then you won't trust it on the special days. And the government agencies, government leaders cannot say, well, I'll joke around and I'll attack people and all of that 90% of the time, but that 10% I'll be serious. People will not take you seriously. And that's a big problem on social. How do you approach LinkedIn in the same, sorry, we went to that. It seems that people read less and less. Should we all be just communicating on YouTube, give up on the written word? Absolutely not. I think with social media, I'd urge you to look up something called the long reads on social, longreads.org and other tools. If you just search long reads, people are using social to point to great big long documentaries, articles, books, all of that stuff. So even though it's short form content, it can point to deep, longer content that can help you. So definitely look that up in what you're doing. And for starting business accounts from scratch, the question and the answer to that is that you can absolutely start from scratch, start small, start simple, get some traction on one account, and then tell people you're on it. You know, you have to tell people. I tell folks, once you start an account, be semi-obnoxious about it. Not obnoxious, but semi-obnoxious by telling people where to find it, that you're on it, putting it on your letterhead, putting it on your business cards, putting it on your signature file. All of that will make a difference. There's a good tool called Wise Stamp, wisestamp.com, that allows you to have uniform signature files across the company or just for yourself that incorporate your social feeds, your last 5 Instagram photos, for example, or your last tweet. It's a great way to get attention to what you're doing. Folks, we're out of time here, so I just want to wrap up and thank our friends at the Alda Center for hosting this free webinar for all of you and for giving you a chance to participate and giving me a chance to be with all of you today. We didn't get into all the questions. I'm going to ask my colleagues Jamie and Radha to please collect all the questions and share them with me afterwards, and I will do something on my Twitter, my Facebook group. You can find a link to it right on my slide. I hope you'll take a photo of this slide and stay in touch with me. And I'd love to connect and love to learn more about what's happening. So even for lame people like me, the coronavirus story has shown me the importance of understanding this stuff more about the work you're doing, in those of you on the medical side or other scientific side, that we all have to have this conversation every day so that we are ready when the trouble comes, and it certainly will come. That's really important. I started by saying that our scarcest resource is human attention, and you folks have given me, an hour and a half of your attention, and I'm incredibly grateful to all of you for doing just that. I hope we can keep in touch. I hope you will follow up with the Alda Center and see all the amazing programs they have around the world. And if I can ever be of help to you, please do get in touch. You have my email address. And I'm going to now turn it back to our colleague, Jamie.
Thank you so much, Sree. That was such a very informative and inspiring session about social media. I loved what you said about leveraging influencers and their networks. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
So we invite you all to visit alldissenter.org for further information about various science communication training workshops that we offer. To finish up, we have a quick 2-question poll for you all, and we'd love your feedback. And finally, we'd like to thank the Kavli Foundation and the American Chemical Society for their generous support that makes it possible for the All Dissenter to offer webinars such as these. Stay tuned for the poll. It should pop up right on your screen. Thank you all again.